Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to tonight's edition of Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Yay! Hello, everyone.
And we are broadcasting on 101.7 FM on CIVL across the Fraser Valley on the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. Well, if you're a regular listener, you will know that Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show, and we focus predominantly on metaphysics and spirituality. And every once in a while, quite regularly actually, we have somebody on the show to inspire us and to help us develop and evolve on a spiritual level.
But isn't that what we do generally on Tuesdays anyway?
It is, yeah.
I hope so. I hope we're able to evolve and...
Well, exactly. But every other week it's us, and every other week we interview someone. And tonight we're going to, we have a guest. And our guest tonight is going to share with us what it takes to create healthy intimacy for those moving past old relationship hurts and those who are young and looking for heartfelt connection that allows their sensitivity, intuition, and joy to flourish.
Oh, sounds like fun.
It sounds really, really great. And listeners, I know that a lot of you have many questions about relationships and how to attract loving, fulfilling relationships. And so tonight should be very informative for you. So our guest, her name is Angela Ambrosia, and she is a master relationship coach. She's also a meditation teacher and healer, and she has 25 years experience in dance and healing, and she blends coaching with deep listening to the body, the heart, and the soul, so that you know and understand and feel your authentic self. And she assists men, women, and children to create new healthy intimacy by enabling them to build a deep heart connection and to celebrate their body and enjoy who they are. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Leslie. Thank you, Corey.
Well, it's a delight to have you on the show. And I think my first question is, how did you get here? How did you get to be the Angela Ambrosia that I just described? Tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
My personal journey was, I'm born in Australia, and around the age of about 21 to 26, I was working as a dance performer in community theatre, and I struggled a lot with my weight and my self-confidence all my life. I was a fat kid, and going into dance was confronting for me because I was putting my out on stage, and I remember quite distinctly struggling with that. And I had experiences in the performance where I finally found freedom from what was the neurosis in my mind about how I looked, whether somebody liked me, whether I was attractive, whether I was wanted by someone in terms of a romantic relationship. And there was this sort of epiphany moment on the dance floor. We were working in a workshop, and I remember doing a process, feeling so connected to myself in the dance. But the certain process we were doing, it was about being seen. And that moment when I was being seen in the workshop, I realised why a lot of my romantic relationships were really struggling and basically failing, because I felt so vulnerable and exposed. And at that point in the dance, I knew I always wanted to work with dance because it's just who I am. I was born singing and dancing. But I realised I wanted to master that feeling of feeling confident and connected in the dance and be able to share that in an intimate relationship. And I knew at that moment, I was about 26, that there was a huge gap. I could feel confident in my body, but as soon as I felt like being witnessed by someone in my full expression of myself or my heart, I felt that was really dangerous. And at that moment, I knew I've got to master this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do. And that's later, about 10 years later, I went into life coaching. I had done healing for a long time, but I realized through coaching, we could ask a lot more questions that would really direct. So all of that insecurity, what is it actually revealing? And then how to create a new sense of self. And the dance is fantastic for that, but the combination with the coaching actually allowed me to create very clear mental awareness, emotional sensitivity, and spiritual awareness, so that whenever my physical body was giving me insecurities or other messages, I was able to make sense of it. And then that's where I am today. It's actually making sense of the 4 parts of self, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual self. And it's really helped me. I found my life partner. I've gone around the world a few times and discovered a lot of amazing people. But I've learned how to process internal dialogue really, really well, so I can help others to do the same, or to help them discover what is that insecure part of yourself. What is it looking to share, overcome, or perhaps what is it trying to show you that's dysfunctional in your environment, in your relationships, in your sense of self. And from that we discover the more that's behind that, because every problem for me is always a option of what are we able to build from that place, even if it's extremely dysfunctional.
So back to that moment on the dance floor. So I think I heard you say that you actually were feeling self-confident in the dance and in yourself until you became aware of someone else's awareness of you. And so, we always say, don't we, in spiritual circles, that it's like, develop a strong relationship with yourself first. That's like the first relationship to develop. And so it sounds like you were experiencing, in a way, in that moment, a strong relationship with yourself, and you got thrown off kilter by the projection of, how are other people perceiving me? So can you talk a little bit more about that and how to deal with that kind of self-consciousness?
When I'll go back to that moment because I'm getting chills. Having you helping me relive sharing that moment, it was only because the person was watching me, who's actually a friend, that I could have the vulnerable sense of self, or the fear was revealed to me. Oh my God, they're seeing me, and am I good enough? And that person, only with their presence was I able to feel and see my own fear, and actually feel safe in that moment because of the nurturing space that was in the group we were working with and the person. So the way to deal with it, what I did in the moment, because I did go off kilter from that confidence, but I go off kilter from myself because it was a nurturing environment.
Right. I see.
It was the people who were nurturing and safe enough for me to be able to witness my fear and insecurity and not judge it. Well, of course I was judging it because I was very judgmental of myself and critical, but I knew that process was there to help me with that criticism, not make it worse. And that is the first step always. Find a nurturing, I don't care if it's a swimming pool, if it's a dog, if it's a group of people, I don't care what it is, but whatever your nurturing space is, create it and spend time to define it. It could take you 3 years, it could take you 20 years. Where growth comes when we're in a space where we can see that vulnerability. So I do agree with the spiritual community of loving the self first, but it's in the community where loving the self is possible. Our parents birth us. Our neighbourhood is where we live. We live in buildings with people. We go to shopping centres with people, malls.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, you.
Well, I guess people, in essence, we're all little computers, even our hearts in a way. So most of our emotional our emotional bodies are created through outside sources. I mean, we learn love from our parents, from our friends, from our siblings, from our peers, and from our mentors as well. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that if I were to lock myself in a room for the first 20 or 30 years of my life and never come out, how would I understand what love was, and how would I understand how to go about loving myself? And again, when you do that, then you look at the other aspect of it, like you're talking, that comes through in public speaking as well, like with the fear of public speaking. Like everybody's so worried about what I'm going to flub up. What are people going to think of me? I mean, look at them all staring at me, and look at them all. What are they thinking? And then it's very interesting how in our lives we have a tendency to give such value to everybody else's opinion of us.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And yet, I think everyone has a core need to be seen and accepted exactly as they are. That's what we really want, to be seen and accepted as we are. And what we're afraid of is not being seen as the authentic one, but having a judgment overlaid on it.
But that even holds true for each other and for ourselves. We want to be seen as we are, but yet when we look at ourselves, we never see us as we are. Like it's a difficult thing to see that the truth of the nature of the individual, in essence, unless you do the work, which Angela does, and which you do, Dr. Leslie, as well, and which I do some of as well with people. But it can be a very difficult step, I guess, to get there.
That it's a chicken and egg scenario. It's like you can't know the self unless you're in relationship with others that reflect who you are, but then you don't value yourself, so you become dependent on how others value you. And we seek and seek and seek that value and recognition or validation. However, if you can look at it, I use the image of Narcissus. Narcissus is a character who stares at himself in the water and falls in love with himself, but he's actually looking for a deeper connection and he can't find it. So if he stops looking at himself and goes in relationship to the other and sees how they see him, at first, like the public speaking example, Corey, the first fear is, what are they going to think? What are they going to think? What are they thinking of me? And then you go into, who am I? Which is a big void for a lot of us, right? But then you go into, well, if I just experience this relationship, who could I be? And that's what the dance gave me. That moment, it was a nurturing space, and that person seeing my vulnerability didn't criticize, didn't have any expectations of me. And I had to move. So we were doing dance, so that helps movement. It's different to public speaking when you're anchored on a spot. But in the movement, I could just dance through the fear. And that allowed the fear to just be accepted, not feel of. And I discovered who I was in the movement. And that's where we get stuck when we're in the mental body or the judgments. We go, oh, I'm not this. And we get stuck and we lose the opportunity to find, what am I, in not knowing who I am. And dance is fantastic. And listening to the emotions also, when you walk with the dance of the emotions, you can discover through them that credible fear and just feel it, let it move through you. And then something else comes. And that's what children, if they get stuck in trauma, don't learn. They don't learn how to go beyond fear. They learn how to hold it, make a judgment of it, and then it comes back. So dance is great to help you witness, and I believe in doing relationship with others to help you witness in nurturing spaces, whether it's Dr. Leslie or another person to help you witness that fear. It makes such a difference to be able to move through it.
Well, I really love the metaphor of, actually, I think all relationships are a dance. They are a dance, aren't they? Whether you're dancing or not, they are a dance. Literally, they are a dance. They are, an exchange between two people. I think that it's a really great metaphor. I think what we might do, I have another question, but maybe we should go to a break. No? Got time, have I, Corey? Okay, then I will ask my question. It's about kids getting stuck and the emotional body, because like many of us as adults have had that experience of that fear that doesn't make sense, where you freeze on the spot, and it's not your mental body, because there's no logical explanation. Why am I behaving like this? And you can't think like an adult. You can't do anything except you're frozen. And so that's kind of like an example of a cellular memory, something that happened really, really young in an emotional level that kind of got stuck there. And I think that's what you were talking about when you were talking about kids. So it's wonderful that you work with kids to try and release them from that, while they're still kids. But can you talk to us a little bit about how you help people to move beyond that cellular level fear that gets hardwired into the body?
Yeah, there's many ways to work with a person. So some of the ways is firstly understanding how the person operates with their mental body and the habits, and how those habits, and the emotional body, and how those habits, the way I is how those habits are actually conditioned by family and culture and specific family relationships. And once you start to see the habits that we have around the emotional mental patterns, if it is a trauma response, like the frozen response, which is actually what happened to me in that moment in the dance when I saw my vulnerability, I froze, had the fear, breathed till something happened and I moved. So in my case, in that moment, I saw what my body response was. But every human being, every child will have a different programming of that emotional management response from that age, and it could even be pre-birth. So some of what I do is I work on definitely bad family conditioning of your emotional responses and your mental judgments. Sometimes a lot of the work is awareness about that first. It's a conscious kind of exploration of, wow, that's what my parents did, and I do that. That's interesting. And then we go to the next layer, which is, how is that actually making me feel? Because we're very good in our culture, our world, of understanding now. We've had a lot of psychology, we've had Freud and Jung and all of the people from them develop that gift of psychology. It's great to understand. But the feeling part, which is where the dance for me, or just feeling through the emotions more effective, is actually to allow you to feel how that emotion feels. So I may work with the inner child. I may also just go to a certain memory of the person where they're getting an emotion. It could be fear, and what's the first memory you had of the fear? And once again, entering protective space. I don't always I recommend people do this without some more support if the trauma is a big one, or if you don't have sort of, like I use a lot of divine and energy work from spiritual guidance. That's always a support. So that's been great for me. But once you get to the memory, you want to give that nurturing space to the child itself. You want to allow the child or that moment to be understood. And you want to also see where there may be beliefs that were created by the child. And you need to have a certain way of talking to the beliefs that don't say, oh, you're an idiot for making that belief. That's what our mental body would do. But you really understand, why did the child make that belief? And from that awareness then, every time you start as the adult to go into freeze mode or flight mode or whatever mode, you start to realise, oh, that's what my child did. And you have building compassion for it. And sometimes we have to work on ancestors too, because ancestors have quite unresolved energy. So I also work on whether in the family line there may be some really recurrent strategies that are, like you're saying, Dr. Leslie, they're emotional responses that just seem out of the blue, like they just don't make sense. I found working with some of the ancestors and I connect to them on an energetic level through meditative processes. That's been very potent for some people as well. Not everyone needs that, but it's just, I found that much more effective than just trying to do it on the individual's sense of self, because we carry within our DNA, our family, our ancestors 7 generations back is living and breathing through us. And that's been very potent to honour that.
Well, thank you. We do need to take a break now, but there's, so much I'd like to ask you about. Listeners, you're tuning into Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and our guest this evening, Angela Ambrosia. And she's a master relationship coach who blends coaching with deep listening to the body. And we're enjoying very much talking to Angela, and we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners. You are tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and tonight's guest, Angela Ambrosia.
All the way from Australia.
That's
G'day.
Right. Good day. And we've been talking about relationships, and I guess how to heal some of the barriers that we have within ourselves that can interfere with us having wonderful relationships with other people and within ourselves. And before the break, you mentioned a few things that I wanted to pick up on. One was about finding the first memory that somebody has, where they lay down a particular belief around the world, about the world, that then informs the rest of their life. And the other was about their ancestors and the racial memory. So, and I know you work intuitively like I do. And so what I wanted to ask you about is sometimes the first memory that someone can have isn't the first incidence, but we can work intuitively, can't we, to help them remember the buried memory that they're not remembering.
I've had situations, for example, where I've worked with someone and they go to a memory and we're talking about that, and then the consciousness brings another memory. Mm-hmm. And as a dancer, I'm pretty fluid. So, okay, let's go to that memory then. And I may come back. Intuitively, I ask, oops, the first memory, do we need to come back and resolve or be with it for some purpose? So sometimes your consciousness starts with memory, and then our brains are so unlimited and so full of connections, and then it may work through the first memory to walk to another memory. And there's always a relationship between the two memories. We don't know what the relationship is. Working intuitively, we can ask. I ask while I'm working, what do I need to do to support that memory, or to, if I need to continue with a certain memory, if we move to another memory. And sometimes people bring up past lives. And sometimes I never resist what the consciousness brings up, specifically because I work with spiritual protection. And so I know that I'm also connecting to that soul or spirit of the person, usually the soul. We know that the soul is always much wiser than me as an intuitive worker or the person. And so my spirit's connecting to their soul and asking that to facilitate which memory and how to address the memory. And sometimes a client will be stuck on one memory and we keep coming back. Those cases are interesting too, because there's more information from the memory. So yeah, it's a very interesting dance with memory, because I think our consciousness now globally is trying to show us this is a much more effective way to understand yourself than what we've previously been using. So cultures for thousands of years have been doing dream work and shamanic work. And I'm seeing people now really allowing things to come up or having memories come up. And those ancient practices of dream work and shamanic work are always still functional and useful. They not have grown up in a culture using that. So intuitive work is wonderful because we can use a lot of those ancient tools and help people to start realizing how the memories are talking to them and bringing them to a deeper acceptance. of themselves, and also perhaps opening up to how amazing their consciousness is, how able it is to show them what needs healing or awareness.
And I think you're right. The difference I see, one of the differences I see about recent times, is that it's so much more about the spirit-body connection than the out-of-body work. You know, now it's like I am spirit and I am bringing my consciousness through my body and operating through my body in an awakened state, as opposed to leaving my body in order to get the information.
And we perhaps had to leave, previous decades, perhaps had to leave our body because our density was, our mental bodies and emotions were so dense.
Exactly right. It has to do with the shift in density and the raise in vibration on the planet, that it's, exactly. It's more possible now.
Wow.
That's the era that we're in. Awakened within the body.
And our brain capacity now means we have so much more available to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing time to be alive, isn't it? And I think that, so what you were talking about, the ancestral and racial type memory, which is part of the DNA, I mean, that's coming up big time to be cleared, because we're really at this tipping point, this shift in human consciousness and human awareness. And, some of these, like you're saying, these patterns of behavior, they unconsciously travel through centuries within a genetic line, or within a racial group that's been treated in a particularly bad way, one way or another. Like in Canada, the First Nations people, for example. But all over the world, there are groups of people who carry a kind of a racial memory. So whether they've incarnated in all sorts of different groups around the world, the one that they're living in, they hold the heavy energy about what that group has been through. And I think that I feel that times are a-changing, and we're being invited to clear all those old patterns and reset the consciousness of humanity. What do you think?
Isn't it like taking down walls as opposed to building walls? I mean, you can build walls geographically, but you can also build walls, the metaphorical walls around yourself. And I think a lot of people are especially, I hate to give any credence to the internet, but the internet has allowed people to share their emotions, share their trauma, share their abuses, share their glad tidings, share their all these things with their communities, their quote unquote communities, and friends, again quote unquote friends. So it makes that awakening is happening, because the more you face, like Angela was saying earlier, the more you face yourself in that mirror of other people's eyes, the more open you are to yourself as well.
Yeah, I love the internet for its ability to expose me in one instant. I can find out the news in country that I never would have gone to in another life if I lived in a previous period of time. So today I'm able to do what you're saying, Leslie, about reach into another country's experience. And unfortunately, the internet puts a lot of opinion there that might flavour or filter the experience, but there's also the real experience of people through all sorts of social media, and you get the feeling of people from other countries more than any other time that we've been alive in a way. The thing I would like to encourage is to not just digest these different cultures instantly. That's the internet. You read a story and you go, oh yeah, I know about the riots in Paris, and you go on with your day. That's what I'm doing at the moment. But then I get reminded that the civil unrest because of the situation of French people in Paris. So I get reawakened to it, but it sort of gets compartmentalized because I instantly can find out about it. Therefore, I don't need any more response to it. So what the internet provides as an opportunity also needs nurturing. Here I go on about nurturing again. We need to encourage, I feel, young people about, there's so much information. You're exposed to so many cultures, so many truths and opinions or perceptions about cultures. How do you build on that to go, I wouldn't even say go beyond walls, to see through walls, or to see the walls of our perceptions and see through them and then build something real? Because a lot of the younger generations now are in a world that's so ephemeris is the word that comes to me. It's so, I can see that on Google, and now I'm off to watch something else on YouTube, and now I'm off to this, and I'm doing soccer training, and then I'm doing that, and they're just scattered. And how do they build something that has perhaps connection or what fulfills them? That's, to me, the future generation questions. What is fulfillment in a world where we're not actually discovering the new possibilities can bring us? We know there's a lot of possibility. Is it actually that we're creating? And that's the challenge of the love relationships or communities that we're building, or businesses. Every part of society now is going through this massive shift about how we are going to anchor something that actually is what we want, not previous generations we're trying to work out. So that's the other curious thing, working with the ancestors. You can feel in the emotions. I've had kids. I have a Sicilian background, so our family is quite intense. Younger kids in that group, they're like, that's not our stuff. They're very clear. They know that that's not their stuff. And they're very open to being themselves, but there's a sense of where's their root, because the old ancestral stuff is still not perhaps integrated in them, and they don't know how to build from that to create their new self. So I find the ancestor work very great, because you can see almost the gift of the ancestors as well as things that need healing or awareness or resolution. And then you can say, well, from that gift, what's next for our world? What do I want to bring? I think ancestor work will be a piece that we need to integrate more consciously as a culture. And I'm seeing people more interested in their roots because they feel disconnected, and there's a lot more immigration globally. So we're going to start, because there's so many separation of countries for people from their birth country, that means there's an opportunity now to change the actual pattern of the root country, of your source country. That certainly happened in my family, and I think that's what globally we're exploring.
So you're talking about something very interesting, and the questions that are percolating in my mind, one of them is, so is the new root that we belong to humanity as opposed to individual groups? Or is it both? Because that's one of the things that's really not worked for us, is the culture of separation. I'm this race, I'm this religion, I'm this political viewpoint, I'm from this country, and, therefore, me and those like me, we're better than you because you're not. And so is the new root global humanity? ?
There's a few pieces. I don't know what perspectives your listeners and yourself might have, but yeah, I'll just share. I do think it is humanity. And where, for me, is it global humanity ? The real question is, what do we wish to create as a global humanity?
Right.
Because we've never had that before.
Yes, we are already more global than ever before. We're not as integrated as we could be, though. But yes, and what do we want to create? Because as mass consciousness, as opposed to allowing a few people to be the ones dictating what's created as well, I think it's opening up for people to decide together and amongst themselves, what do we want?
Which never happened before on Earth. It was always more like well, a couple of individual civilizations may have had more communal ways of being. The Aboriginal people, as an example, in Australia and other parts of the earth, but we haven't had it as a globe. So if the more we ask the question, what do we want to create, and create forums of community discussions, or just getting together, having a drink, as we say in Australia, and having a yarn and seeing what projects we want to do together, it takes it away from top down.
Yes.
And that's an exciting possibility. And I also want to create more groundedness in the body, because I think the last couple of decades, we've, like you said earlier, Dr. Lee, been doing out-of-body work. We've been going out of the body to try and get spiritual connection. And I think now we need to be in the body, with people, in community, to try and get how do we want to be as a community. And that will help anchor a lot of the spiritual work that we've been doing for a couple of decades, since the 70s.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, you look at the news, and you could say, oh well, it's a dreadful mess, the world. But I don't feel that way. I feel very hopeful for us, actually. I really do. So, you know, I'm going to switch topics a little bit, because I know from our listeners, they are, as individuals, many of them are very concerned about their romantic relationships. And so I'm interested in talking with you about that, in order to just help them with that. And so where should we begin? Let's see. I'm trying to think of some of the most common questions that they write in with. And
will he come back?
Yeah, it's about attracting a mate, really, isn't it? Will he come back?
Will I find myself?
How does he feel about me? They're looking for an intuitive read. How does this person feel about them? They're not comfortable going and asking them, how do you feel about me? And will he come back? Is he cheating on me? And I guess a lot of it's to do with just this real uncertainty. And perhaps, like we were talking at the beginning of the conversation, their validity depends on someone else's actions and opinion. So how can we help the individual who's looking for love?
I'm just pulling in all the resources that I could share, and looking for some things that will really help ground their energy. Because when we are constantly searching for where is the one, there is a book calling in the one, and they summarized it very well. We're looking for a sense of completeness in the self.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you mentioned, Corey. Are they looking for that validation for others? That's their whole life is dependent on other people's opinions. And that creates a circuit, a little bit like Narcissus. He's looking in the water at his reflection, and he's not really looking. He's just seeing the same old Narcissus. He ain't looking at who he really is. He's seeing I myself was creating a neurosis about where is he, where's the one. So because I've lived through that from about 5 years old, I was always in love with someone on the television, till 47, so that's 40 years of looking. I did, on a practical level, was first I acknowledged that there was that sense of lack in myself, and I went, okay, Angela, you don't have a very good relationship with yourself. That's okay. How can I start building a better relationship with myself? And that one little thing you do, how do you build on it? And you keep your focus on it. And then the other thing I did from very early on in life, I fantasized. I'm a great fantasy person. And then later in my life, fantasies come true. Not always with the greatest happy endings, I have to say. But fantasy work has been used by shamanic traditions and cultures for years. And they weren't just making it up, but they were doing vision. You go off and you walk and you have a vision. So I often go into nature and I connect to nature as a way to ground myself and get out of my head. And I just feel my loved one. And I was doing variations of that from very early on in life. But when I was broken up from yet another relationship, I'd do it again. And what happened was I'd go out, could be not even in nature, could be just wanting to dance or feel my happiness, whatever makes you happy. And somebody would come up. Might be a potential interest mate, might be a friend, a new friend. It could be someone just offering me a story. And then you start to build the consciousness. You're not asking those old questions like, will they come back? Do they love me? Do they validate who I am? Am I enough? You get out of that cycle. Because as long as you are focusing on, am I enough? What are you going to get? You're not enough.
Exactly.
And some people I've seen just have to do that head banging, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. They have to do it until they suddenly go, I can't do this anymore. I've seriously seen that is, for some people, a journey that you're choosing to struggle with in this life. As soon as you say, I'm done with that struggle, which is what happened to me quite a bit, I'd go out and these amazing things would happen. So I started to think, what if I just kept focusing on this vision work of what I wanted to feel with the person? And then I started building better and better relationships, not with just a romantic relationship, but with everybody. And it brought myself to myself. It brought the deeper connection to the self. Now, with questions like, will he come back? The other question to start throwing in with the will he come back is really about, if he comes back, what do you want?
Yes. And let's address that when we come back after a short break. So if he comes back, what do you want? Listeners, you've been tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and our guest, Angela Ambrosia. And she's a master relationship coach. So we're talking about relationships. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners. You are tuning into Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey and Angela Ambrosia, who is a relationship coach. And we've been talking a little bit about common relationship questions that you send in, listeners. And one of them is, will he come back? Is he coming back? And Angela was starting to give us a different perspective on how to look at that, which is, if he comes back, what do you want? So can you expand on that for us, Angela?
So that question, if he comes back, what do you want? What are you wanting to create with this person? Focus on the vision of that. And this is just old school magic, but you visualize the magic you want to create with that person. What intimacy do you want to have, whether it's emotional, whether it's financial. Some people want some sort of financial thing. Because why would someone energetically want to you if you're from a desperate place? And the other piece, if he comes back, what do I want? What boundaries? How will he treat you? How will he speak to you? How will he touch you? How will he make you feel inside to know that this is really what you want? Unfortunately, we get stuck on, will he come back? Does she want me? Does she find me enough? Am I attractive to her? We get stuck, but that's not attraction. That's not attractive. People are attracted when you give them something inspired or turned on by, and that's what is attractive. And also it is a little bit attractive when you're not desperate and needy of them, and then they suddenly go, well, what is this person and who are you? So the more we become more interested in who we are, we become naturally more attractive. And if you can get yourself out of the same over repetitive question, it's the best thing to do, because that repetition is just manifesting the same sense of not enough. And you've got to start filling up the void. You've got to do anything. I don't care. I get people to ride naked on bikes. That's what one client did, and I was like, okay, good on you. That fills you up. do that.
Oh. So another common question we get is, should I stay in this relationship or should I leave this relationship? So how would you go about helping someone who's asking that question, should I stay or should I go?
Yeah, it's a very hard one. And there's so many different relationship scenarios. So some people have children. Some people have, it's a second relationship, but you have children and there's new partners there and there's a family, a new family, and you've already left one family. You know, there's so many different, and sometimes it's just you're with someone that's not quite right. So each situation, I just want to say respectfully, there are quite different considerations involved. So unfortunately, I can't give a cookie cutter answer about what to do for that specific question. But one thing I've done with specific cases is to look at if you were to actually change the structure of the relationship. So sometimes people are trying to make the relationship fit into a cookie cutter marriage or living together situation that does not work. And I've heard of one couple, they had kids and they were just constantly fighting. So they decided separate houses. They still have relations, but they're not in the same house, and that solved a lot of problems. We tend to look at relationships as if they're supposed to be like Bert and Ernie or something that we're familiar with. Bert and Ernie's from Sesame Street, if anyone doesn't know that reference. But Bert and Ernie like a couple, and they have this sort of dynamic, and you get up every morning and you have toast together, and that's the way it is. And some relationships are suffocated by that. So that's one thing I've noticed, that we need to sometimes actually change the physical structure of the relationship, and that's been helpful. And other times you have to actually sit down and go, what are all the factors that I'm fearful of losing if I left? And it's sort of a pros and cons list, but I don't like to use those language relationships because it's never really a con to leave someone, or it's not like a business decision. But look at the pros of, was to leave this person, what could open up for me? Because that gives your consciousness then a possibility of seeing what's possible. And if you see the fears of what would happen if you left this person, then you see the work that's still to be done, which we're all working on our whole lives. We always are working on things that we think we can't be able to manage our fears. But if you also say, if I left this person, what could open up to me? It starts to actually allow the consciousness to explore what that possibility is. And that can help to make decisions that are very difficult, especially if finances and kids are involved. People find it hard to make practical shifts. And sometimes you need to acknowledge that you're scared about losing a person. If it's just you're seeking validation about someone you, that you'll be enough, that's pretty easy to solve because there's lots of people in the world. But if you deeply care for someone and it's just not the right relationship for you, I still go back to, like, if it's a romantic relationship, there's no kids involved, there's no financial things. It's just you're in a relationship and you're sort of like, not sure. I do my vision work and I step into what do I really, really, really want to create in this relationship. Sometimes I'll have a meditation and I'll just see myself connecting to the person from heart to heart. And I'll see myself sharing that feeling that I want to create in the relationship. And then when you come back down to earth in your everyday life, if that person starts to give you messages that's something they're not able to provide for you, or they're just not interested, you're getting direct messages from the person. That's not where they're vibrating. And so then it becomes a matter of, I'm going to give myself 3 months, 6 months to see if this relationship can grow into what my vision is asking, what my spirit, my soul is asking to experience in love. And that you have much more ability to measure, is this relationship feeding your soul? And if it's not, there's a choice to, and you have more ability to make a choice because you know it's not feeding your soul. And that's where we make a mistake. We come from our reality and we don't connect to the soul to make those choices, because the soul knows if the person is the one to stay with. Sometimes it's a person for 5 years and you move on. And if you're older and you're listening, you know that.
So let's ask about the breakup then, and the heartbreak of the breakup, which, you know, if you're older, yes, maybe you've been through, but especially when it's your first breakup, it's not soul destroying, but it's devastating, isn't it? And I think often people are not communicating with their soul, you know, when they're in that deep pain that can come up. So how can people get through heartbreak, and what can you learn through an experience of heartbreak?
There's so much to learn. Now I'm out of heartbreak, I can say that. But in the time, I was soul destroyed in one of my big breakups. I had many, but one particularly was soul destroying. I think it was soul shattering. What I learnt was that I'm still here, and I had a big trauma. I'd had other traumas in my life as well. My parents' passing was the biggest, but this breakup happened after that. So one thing I learned was that a breakup can help you process latent hurt from losing my parents. And wonderful. It can help you deal with the fear of being lonely, or can teach you to be compassionate to yourself and others, because they're going through loss. And it can help you see the parts of yourself that perhaps you've been suppressing. So a breakup is an amazing, what's that reaction that happens when two chemicals come together and they get a combustion response? It's like once you break up with the person, all the stuff comes out, and there's no filter. So that's a great opportunity to see all your doo-doo or your hurt, and it's hard to organise that. So sometimes in our world we want to be normal and functional. Yes. I come from a bit of operation, so I'm not interested in functionality when I break up. So you can find out who your friends are and consult with some of those people who you connect with, and actually start sharing on a deeper level, different level. You might also find out friends who are going to come out and tell you, I never thought that person was right for you, but I didn't tell you. Yeah. So that can build a new bond, a new connection to people, because you never talk about that stuff. I had a conversation with a family member once who had a breakup after I had a breakup. Yeah, I had a breakup. And we just started talking for the first time in our adult lives about relationships. And that was a fantastic gift. So heartbreak at the first can be, or if you have a big one, can be purposefully soul-shattering, and it feels awful. But don't try to be perfect, and you will start to discover so much of yourself that perhaps has been suppressed or ignored.
Thank you. We're getting towards the end of the show, and so I wonder, is there any piece of wisdom that you would love to share with our audience that perhaps I haven't asked you about yet?
Well, you've given me so much opportunity to share in ways I didn't expect tonight. So I think a personal piece is children who are growing up in a world where a lot of shifting relationships are happening. So it's not so much a wisdom, but it's a desire to encourage children to discover true friendship first before romantic or sexual intimacy, because that foundation of friendship will help them navigate any BS, as we say down under, about what romantic love should be, or how they should be attractive, or whether they should look a certain way, or what clothes they wear. If we help young people establish what is true friendship and respect of a friend as a foundation, that can really assist children to then make better choices in little conflicts you might, or troubles you might have in romance.
Thank you. I think that's very wise words. And I think many of us adults, if we look back on our own childhood, we would have benefited greatly from someone giving us that advice.
Definitely.
So we are at the end of the show. So if any of our listeners want to get a hold of you, how can they?
My best email is angela@loveandrelationshipcoach.com. And that's the website, loveandrelationshipcoach.com. And that will be the simplest way. You can also find me on Facebook, where I do Facebook Lives, and that's under Angela Ambrosia. And you can check out the Facebook. I share some wisdoms or insights, and if you have questions as well, you might be able to share those as well in the Facebook Lives.
Well, thank you so much, Angela, for being on the show and for really broadening our minds with respect to relationships and the evolution of human relationships even.
Yeah,
and,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, listeners, I encourage you to check Angela out, because there's so much more wisdom she has that we didn't even get to talk about. All right, so you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey and our guest Angela Ambrosia, and that's it for tonight, folks, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. You can also find the questions that were asked during this show at the website on our free card reading podcast page, where you'll find a full list of them. Come back again.